Our next speaker is Stephen Kilbourne, not to be confused with Jason Bourne, but Stephen Kilbourne. And Stephen doesn't have any slides, but that's okay. I asked for something unique about Stephen, and he told me that he had been a foster parent for 5 children, which I thought was amazing. And my response to Stephen when he wrote that to us was that, wow, I said, you're really a giver. And I guess that's why Stephen is here today, to really give to us and share his knowledge with us. So Stephen, I'll let you take it away and talk about automation does not replace collaboration. So you go ahead and take it away.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm a quality engineer at Dialexa, and we do things a little different at Dialexa. We're marketing ourselves as the technology, design, creation, and research firm. So we partner with a lot of different size companies in a different in different markets, ranging from healthcare to finance to who knows. So my role shifts a lot from engagement to engagement as we partner with those clients. Sometimes I focus on writing automated tests. Sometimes I work as a PO or Scrum Master. So I thought that would give me a different perspective to bring to a discussion that's themed around quality coming together. So I'm talking a little bit more about automated tests, as my talk title suggests. And I actually write automated tests, and I started, like a lot of us probably did, I was a manual tester, and I started learning to program a little bit. So I wrote some tests that were bad tests, and then learned from my mistakes, and eventually wrote better tests. And then as I got better at that, I started looking like a lot of us, wanting to find what's the best new automated tool, what's the best new framework that I could be using. And that it's fun to start trying those tools, but I want to kind of step back from doing that. And before even trying to look at, see who's marketing and providing this great new tool, why are we actually writing our tests? And I think the reason to do that is because we want to bring confidence in what we're delivering to the end user. We want to provide fast, accurate, reliable, and predictable feedback and make maintenance easier. We want to know, hey, the test failed, and be able to go right to why it failed and fix that before it causes problems for those users. So I think there's already a perfect tool out there. And I think that tool is actually conversations. And I get you. I'm like most people that end up in quality or development. I tend to be an introvert and hate talking to people. But with the goals of making good tests in mind, let's bite the bullet and kind of think about what these conversations can do. So have you ever tried working on a story for a feature and the developer thinks it's done, you test it, and then the product owner says, no, you missed something. So then you repeat, and you're stuck in this loop, all because of missed expectations. Really, a shared understanding promotes shorter feedback cycles and faster releases. We can clarify things up front if we talk. We're no longer stuck in this endless code and test and recode loop. Multiple perspectives brought about by collaboration can bring a shared understanding. Those connected team members can drive success by talking about their technical understanding of what the product does, what the end user is expecting. It's not really a new concept in the development world. A lot of us have probably heard of BDD and Cucumber and all of this, but that really seems to get focused around actual writing the feature code. I want to really shift that and say that those conversations actually help our automated testing as well. The developers don't code alone, but we're, as automated engineers, we are actually developers of writing actual features that should be good code, as was mentioned earlier. If we're on our own in a silo and not talking, we're going to end up being in these many waterfall situations. So at the end of the sprint, you're rushing to test everything, and either you have 24 hours to get it all done before a demo so you can say it was done, or even worse, you're saying stories are done, and then the next sprint you're trying to write all those automated scripts for those things that for some reason you felt comfortable enough to say that was done enough to give it to an end user. Testing in silos can also lead to very redundant test strategies. A lot of us have seen the idea of the testing pyramid, and the pyramid's great. It shows a good ratio of tests, but a lot of times we get lost in those conversations of how many tests should there be. And the ratios can be helpful, but it also should be reminded you there's actually a lot of layers you can test. For validation, there could be validation that's only done on the back end. I don't need to write an end-to-end test if it can only be validated on the back end. So I could talk with the developers and say, hey, the unit test should be covering this. Is that happening? Okay, great. I'm actually forcing that pyramid shape to happen and not redoing it in my end-to-end test that's going to be more flaky. The other thing is tests can't make up for misaligned expectations. The analogy of I'll be there, one thing that happens a lot is I'll tell my wife that I'll be there in 10 minutes, and I mean 10-ish minutes. She thinks I mean I'll be there exactly 10 minutes. So 20 minutes later, I show up and she's kind of frustrated because I didn't follow through with those expectations. That happens a lot in the development world. You have a developer that has an expectation of what they're going to do in the story. They write it, and as they write it, the story doesn't really say, okay, I'm going to create this account, and that gives all the details of the endpoints to put. The user needs to, when they're creating an account, give their email and username, stuff like that. And so they do it, and the tester tests it, and the product owner says that, oh, the user should be landing on the dashboard already logged in at the end, but the developer and tester had assumed otherwise, that they just land back on the landing page. Those missed expectations are what really throws people off and causes those feedback loops. Too often we're turning to technology solving those problems, but things like this happen all the time because we're not collaborating with each other. Tools can help, but it's crucial to have these conversations. If you only test the acceptance criteria, you may be missing the nuance of what the end user really cares about. Bring in your stakeholders, bring in developers, bring in designers, ask questions, learn how the developer can implement the feature, learn how you can help validate that, learn how the end user can accomplish those goals. By having these conversations, it's going to accomplish way more than trying to find the flashy new testing suite. Having those conversations is really going to allow you to bring quality to your product.
Yeah, Stephen, we got one question in from Moss that I think is a really good question about, the PO saying no, it's not done, and then developer saying yes, it's done. What do you do if you're the middleman there?
I think it's best to have those conversations up front and together. And if the PO is the one writing your user story and they say that's what it needs to be, you need to go ahead and work on it and get it done, because that's what the final version needs to have, and not get caught up in petty arguments of who's right or wrong. But you're trying to, everyone should be on the same page of you're wanting to provide a feature for a user. And if it's a missed expectation and the story points were way off, then those story points should have just been estimates anyway. So you estimate it off and it's going to average out.
What I was wondering about was if you, in some organizations, kind of the devs and the quality are segregated, not together at all. And so do you find that anybody would challenge your authority if you said, we need to get together and talk about this. Is it okay to do that within your organization, or do you think that it's
Yeah, so we partner with a lot of organizations, and some companies we've worked with have traditionally done that. And we really push to try breaking down those walls, whether physically moving a QA to sit with the development team, or just involving people in those meetings, because really the closer you are to someone physically when it's not COVID, the easier it is to have those conversations of, before the developers even doing it, you can start talking and say, hey, if I code it this way, this is going to happen. Is that really what we want? Because that feels a little weird to me. Or if you're the QA and you're trying to test something and verify it, you're like, how did you really get this to work? Because it's not working for me. Am I misunderstanding this? Because as a QA, I can misunderstand acceptance criteria just as much as a developer.
One of the bigger challenges for smaller companies is obviously time, right? I mean, yes, you're gonna have all of these conversations up front, but then you won't think of through all scenarios up front. There might be things that come to your mind after the fact. But then in a smaller company, the product person has multiple responsibilities, the developer has multiple responsibilities. So it's kind of difficult to have a lot of time to spend to have these conversations up front, right? So how do you handle that situation? What's the best way to do? Because it's kind of becomes asynchronous communication at that point, which obviously will result in some of these missed or misunderstood expectations, right?
Yeah, I think it's best to really, before you even start work, and if you're talking like a BDD or scenario, developer is going to be talking, even if they're not writing tests, and that's true BDD, they're going to be having those conversations, trying to understand the acceptance criteria. And I think it's fine to have some of that asynchronous thing going on of like, I don't know the answer right now. Let's make this assumption. Let's go talk to a BA or someone in design that may have written this and the design doesn't quite add up. And we can jump back into this later, or we can break it into a different story of it doesn't really affect the story.
Okay, well, there's some great comments in the chat, but we're about at the end of the line here. Thank you for giving us your time and your expertise, Stephen. It was really great.